But all right, y'all, we are back with another episode of the Brothers-in-Law podcast.
Hello, hello.
I got my co-host, my brother-in-law, Mr. Blackbird, with me right here.
I'm here.
We got a very special guest. We got Roland in the building.
How's it going?
We're gonna get more into your introduction and more into your story in a few. For those who are tuning in for the very first time, here at the Brothers-in-Law podcast, we talk about all things criminal law, but really all things law related. It varies episode to episode, guest to guest. But the idea is people can engage with the podcast and learn a thing or two about just the nature of criminal law or nature of us, what we do, and just leave a bit more informed than when they started the episode. So that's what we do here. But yeah, so today our episode is going to be focused on law enforcement and the black community and how the relationship between the black community and law enforcement. And I'm very excited to have our guest here. And the reason why I say that is because Conrad and I have been working together for the past 7 years.
Going on 7.
Going on 7 years.
Yeah.
And it's not common where we have healthy relationships with law enforcement in general, or yet alone court officers. Like, it's fine, it's high on by, good to see you. But I feel like Roland has like gone out of his way to be more friendly, to be like, how you doing, checking on us. And I really appreciate you for that, Roland. And whenever I thought about, who would I want to have this conversation, it was easy to think of you. So I'm really happy that you're here. And I hope people can just know your story more and learn a bit from this conversation.
Yeah. And like Imani said, Roland's always been a very welcoming guy.
Right.
I feel like almost every time I walk into the courthouse, Roland gives me a new fact. Man is literally a walking history book, a walking encyclopedia. He seems to have been very connected in his life. He knows a lot of people, a lot of figures.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, great guy.
And what I appreciate about Roland is, like, I feel like court officers have the power to, like, either make your day a good day,
right,
or make your day a very bad
day.
And days where I haven't had good days, you just, your face and your demeanor is always a pick me up, and I've just never had an interaction with you that I don't leave, feeling good about it. So I'm very grateful, and I really hope there are more court officers that are like watching you as an example and trying to carry that same kind of torch.
Appreciate that.
So yeah, so Roland, let's talk about you a little bit. I want you just to tell us who you are, where you from, and what was your path to. We already said it. The cat's at the bag. You are a court officer in the Bronx, but like, what led you there? How'd you get there? What's your story?
I took a test. That's the short part of it. But I remember being in the 7th grade, 13 years old, just finished reading the autobiography of Malcolm X.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm like, yo, this is great. This is awesome. I start going down to Harlem. They had something called the First World Coalition. It'll be every Saturday, 2:00, 145th Street. Powerful stuff.
You grew up in Harlem?
I grew up in the Bronx,
Got
South
you.
Bronx.
Okay.
And what really got me on the path of wanting to get involved in law enforcement was a book by Sam Greenlee. Actually, I saw the movie first. That was banned in this country at one point. It was called The Spook Who Sat by the Door.
Heard that book for sure.
And I remember seeing it and thinking to myself, well, my father was against me going to the military. He was a military man.
Mm-hmm.
But law enforcement, you could get certain skills
Mm-hmm.
and you can stay connected to your community if you do it the right way.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured, why not? However, with all the other classes I was taking and my personal experience with law enforcement, let's just say I didn't want to go the NYPD route. Okay. But court officers seemed a little bit more cerebral, if you would. Where you can go, you can still be connected to people. You're not exactly PD, but you're still in law enforcement to the point where you could do some things.
Yeah.
And so I was 16. I had taken the test the first time.
Mm-hmm.
I think I scored an 80. Never got called back. Taking it again when I was 21. I was out the night before at Jimmy's Bronx Cafe. Woke up late, jumped in the shower, said, I'm not going to take it. But then I changed my mind. So why not? Jumped in the cab, got over there, took the test, didn't study for it. I forgot what I scored, but I know they called me back. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Okay. And so you started off during court, being a court officer, and that's all you've done for the past how many years now?
25 years.
25 years.
But prior to that, I mean, I've worked as a private tutor, a youth mentor, and publishing, Bantam Doubleday Dell. I worked with the African Research Educational Institute, where we did the works of Sheikh Anta Diop, and that was under Professor Yalingi McGimmy. He was doing a lot of work down in Harlem at the time, so we got to work together quite a bit.
Got you.
Done a lot.
I'm saying. I feel like you gave us the cliff notes, but I'm
Right.
sure the story is a lot more detailed than that.
But I would say my real passion, though, was always, when you said to tell you about myself, I would say I'm a father first and foremost. That's the greatest job and title one can have. But I'm also an activist at heart, to the point where it allows me to see humanity, or just humanity in people, whether I deal with you in a way that would be aggressive normally.
Yeah.
I look for the humanity in you, keep it professional.
Yeah.
But connect with you.
Yeah.
Because I never want a person to feel as if I'm targeting them for them to be at their lowest moment at that point in time.
Yeah.
You know, I don't believe a mess up defines who you are.
Yeah.
It's how you respond to it, not react, but how you respond. And
Right.
you try to move forward from that. You try to grow from it when possible.
Yeah.
So that's my personal belief.
Okay. I heard you mention the autobiography of Malcolm X earlier. That's my favorite book, and Malcolm X is my favorite historical figure. But I'm just wondering, what kind of impact did that book have on you and your thinking?
Well, initially, it made me want to become a black Muslim.
Okay.
But when I read to the very end of it, and I finished the whole book, and I read it probably about, I want to say, a good 6-7 times, at least, in my teens alone, I came to realize that his thing was about history, about study, doing the research. And from that, I gained to understand that, it's not what people call you. It's who you are and how you define yourself. So carrying that over to the job, I tell new officers, that shield doesn't define you. You define that shield. It's going to actually make you bigger in terms of, if you're a jerk out of the uniform, you put that shield on, you're a bigger jerk. But if you actually care about people, prior to you put that shield on, you're going to care about them a little bit more, if done correctly. So what I got from that was just to have a set of values and not to deviate from it to the point where you don't recognize who you are, and be willing to accept accountability for your mistakes and grow from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my question is, it's very different being a court officer and working like for the NYPD. But I'm sure people like see the uniform and still assume it's all the same thing.
Right.
Have you ever dealt with any like negative feelings about you being a police officer, you being a black police officer?
Absolutely.
And how do you deal with that? What's your thought process?
I'll go back to the Malcolm X analogy. I know who I am, but I also understand that they may not know me personally, but they know me historically. So the historical experiences you have with different people, the people have with the agency that you represent or the field you represent, that speaks louder than anything that I can represent to. I say, oh, no, but I'm what I represent to them in that time. Their traumas and everything else. I do not have to react to that. I need to be able to respond appropriately, give them the help they need. If they have a question for me, tell them what they need to do, where they need to go.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, my job is basically to make sure that they go about their way safely, and I got the job done.
Yeah.
That's all I care about.
Got you.
I just choose not to react to certain things. But
Yeah.
when I do have to do my job,
Yeah.
to the point where it becomes disruptive,
Yeah.
or I see an assault and I do it, it's for that thing. But if
Yeah.
I see you the next day, as far as I'm concerned, you get a clean slate. You do it again, okay, we'll do the same program again. But I give you that clean slate
Yeah.
moving forward.
That's good to know. I feel like not everyone will have that same mentality for
Right.
sure.
Yeah.
You said you grew up in the Bronx, South Bronx.
South Bronx.
You work in the South Bronx now.
St. Mary's Project.
Yeah. How important is it? How important was it to you
Mhm.
to like work in the same community that you grew up in?
I'm going to answer it in two ways.
Okay.
When I first came on, it was important for me to not work in the community I grew up in.
Really?
so I could see how they treated people outside my community.
Mm.
When you start to notice, I worked up in White Plains first.
Mm-hmm.
And my first week on the job in White Plains, I had a coworker nearly put his weapon out on me because he didn't recognize me as an officer.
Mm-hmm.
And I was 24 back. I'm 48, so I was
Wow.
24 back then, just like Carlton Banks on purpose. No, I'm this young black kid from the South Bronx.
Yeah.
And had a great first week at the job. Officer, older white officer, I just finished speaking to him. I had a great conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I leave, forgot that I left my car keys and wallet inside my locker.
Mm-hmm.
Go back up to command ops to the locker room, and same officer. Now I'm in plain clothes. I'm not in uniform when he first saw me.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, can I help you? I said, no, I'm good. It didn't click.
Right.
The second time, he goes, no. What are you here for? And I'm looking at him like, yo, I just spoke to you.
Right.
Like we just had a conversation.
Mm.
So again, I go to move further.
Mm-hmm.
So he blades himself, puts his hand on his pancake. It's called a pancake holster,
Mm-hmm.
our off-duty holsters that we carry.
Mm-hmm.
And it took, at the time, a sergeant, Debbie Petrinos. She goes, I'm gonna say his name, Bernie. Bernie, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
He's an officer. He's one of us. Man looks me up and down. He goes, officer. Oh, the job's changed.
Wow.
So for a year, I bit my tongue just to observe and watch everything that happened up there. And you would tend to see how certain people were treated.
Mm-hmm.
And how even those who are in our profession, if you're a county attorney, you walk it through, they wanted to see your ID.
Right.
But if you are a county attorney who was white, they weren't asking for the IDs.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
If I stopped them, oh, yeah, do you have your ID? No, they're good, Roland. Let them go.
Wow.
So I needed to not be in my community first so I
Mhm.
could see how they were treating people.
Mm.
This way, when I came down to my community to work, I could understand how. I already had an understanding, but when you're inside and you actually see it and feel it,
Yeah.
you figure out a better way of how to maneuver around it and how to also attack it.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
It's funny. I don't always think about the types of discrimination that people face in other fields,
Right.
especially when it comes to law enforcement.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really interesting to hear your story, and it's also saddening to know like your experiences is kind of still happening in
Right.
other fields. Like Conrad and I have had many stories of, sitting in the front row in the courthouse and someone asking, "Hey, this only for lawyers,"
Right.
and we're
Right.
like, "Yeah, I know," and then having
Mhm.
to prove that we're
Prove
lawyers.
that we're lawyers.
Right.
And
Right.
it's just sad that these, stories of racism are still
Right.
existing to this day.
I actually I'm happy when it comes to my attention, because if I wasn't aware of it, it's a reminder, and it keeps, I don't want to be too comfortable to the point where I let my guard down.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And that might be a weird thing to say, but I think a lot of times when you become comfortable, you're not aware.
Yeah.
When you're not aware, you allow things to happen. We allow things to happen. It gets worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
So, I welcome the experience, and that was just one of several.
Yeah.
And I think it shows, no matter where you are, no matter what position you make it to in America, you can't divorce that Black experience,
Mhm.
right? Like you're Black first, no matter
Right.
what, right? And
Mhm.
because of how this country was built, how this country was operated, how this country grew, people are going to treat you a certain way just because you're Black,
Mhm.
right? And doesn't matter what you do.
Right.
I'll take a step further. It's not necessarily because you're Black. It's because they're white supremacists or racist.
Yes. Yes.
So if you flip it that way and stop thinking about, oh, they're doing this because I'm Black, which they are, but flip it back to them. Put that
Right.
responsibility back on
On
them.
them. Yeah.
Mhm.
And one of the first things they tell you in the academy is we don't see color. All we see is blue. What they don't say is there are different shades of blue.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
You have light blue, you have dark blue.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not always about the skin tone. It's also about the consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
You have a lot of what we would think would be dark blue. The consciousness isn't there.
Hmm.
So it doesn't really make a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm really happy you said that. I'm always curious about like how strong that mentality is
Mhm.
in law enforcement, that is blue over everything. Is that a real thing?
My first experience of that,
Yeah.
working in Yonkers City Court. And yeah, I went to law school as
Yeah.
so I'm sure you're aware that Yonkers they've been studied in law schools segregation.
Yeah.
And I think their last desegregation case took place in the 90s in their housing in the school system.
Wow.
So here I am working in Yonkers, and I'm involved in an arrest where a Yonkers police officer, I think he was off duty at the time, um, he arrests this young man. And it got to a point where there were three of them all together, but he was just focused on one. And my handcuffs ended up on this individual. I had no idea why I was even arresting him,
Right.
but I happened to be there at that moment. And my thinking at the time was, I don't know what this man's trying to do. I don't know what happened, but let me just get him out of the situation.
Mm-hmm.
I did that. I said, oh man, it's probably just a discount. Now, I saw what happened from the moment he walked out of the building to the moment he was arrested. And this cop was very egotistical, big ego. After the arrest was made, the cop lies. Cop lies and says, oh yeah, he assaulted me. He assaulted him. I never saw that happen. Steadfast on that. Oh, well, and I had to fight 3 people by myself. Really? Then how did my cuffs end up on him? So he was trying everything in his power to stick an off-duty injury on this young man.
Wow.
I found that out later on.
Yeah.
The DAs entertained it.
Wow.
Wow.
I get called to testify before the grand jury. My statement had always been, I never saw that part happen. This is what I saw happen.
Yeah.
But yet, my own agency, the courts, I shouldn't blame the whole agency, but I'll put the responsibility upon certain supervisors in my agency.
Yeah.
Want me to change my story. So we jive more with Yonkers PD's story.
Yeah.
I refuse.
Yeah.
Now, coworkers, they will ostracize you.
Yeah.
Wow.
They would push you to the side. I had Yonkers police officers where I would walk to my vehicle. We had a parking lot, 104 South Broadway. And they would try to hit me with their car as I'm walking to my vehicle.
Oh, wow.
But I'm from the Bronx. So we
Yeah.
walk slowly when they try to hit you with the car. I didn't say it was the smartest thing. It's one of those things where you realize then, wow, this whole, you're blue first. They take it very seriously.
Yeah.
What pissed them off is I didn't change my story.
Yeah.
I ended up testifying before the grand jury. And as you know, the grand jurors get to ask you questions after you give your testimony. Well, I got called to the stand 4 times, and every time I walked off the stand,
Yeah.
the ADA would tell the police officer what I said, how to combat it, because you pass each other in the hall. Well, he made one mistake. When he finally decided he wanted to come after, poke holes in my story. Officer Font, if you were there that day, why didn't you see the defendant assault Officer Miller? So, because it never happened. No more questions. Now it comes all out. I share that part because I had to learn early on. You tap dance a bit. You realize it's a serious thing, blue all over everything else. But you still have to look at yourself in the mirror and still like the person you see.
Yeah.
You have to be able to look at the person you're with, be it your child, a significant other,
Yeah.
and still be someone they can respect. You can't do that if you're sitting there and you're lying about what happened. So I gave him a way out so he could come clean about what happened.
Yeah.
But as soon as that question was asked,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to lie for you.
Yeah.
And I let it all come out. I was like Nino Brown up there.
Yeah, I was gonna ask where that conviction came from, right? Because so many other people might have folded in that situation.
My father
Yeah. Okay.
and my mother. But my father is 6'3", 6'4", 200 odd pounds, just a big guy, respected in the community as you walk through. Worked for transit, and as a bus driver and then a supervisor for over 30 years.
Wow.
My mother was a stay-at-home mom. Had a strong foundation, strong base. So no one messed with my father. Even if they did, it was like, what are you smoking? What are you doing?
Right.
It's just one of those things. So you learn early on. I modeled my behavior on certain things after him. Thankfully, I don't have his. My father was short, very short temper.
Okay.
Right.
So I have my mother's temperament in many respects.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're a real patient person. I've seen it in person. So.
All right, I got two questions. So first is, you seem to be like a really convicted person. You have your beliefs. You stand by them. You seem pretty unwavering. You know who you are, and it's someone who's compassionate, someone who understands the community and the culture. Like how have you been able to stay at this job for 20 plus years when it's I would assume that like you would have experienced so much adversity. There's people who like, no, it's blue over everything. You're on outside. How have you been able to maintain like your identity, number one, and just being able to stay in this role for so long?
Because I also learned early on that what other people think about me is none of my business.
Mm.
You start doing that, they're going to be able to manipulate you
Yeah.
to do whatever they want you to do. So, if they say, oh, yeah, that Roland over there, he's XYZ. Yeah, I am. And I'm going to keep doing what I need to do.
Yeah.
You're familiar with Hawk Newsom? You
Mm.
familiar with Hawk Newsom?
I
No.
heard the name.
Hawk Newsom's with Black Lives Matter Greater New York chapter. Him and his sister Shavona. I get along with them pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
There was an incident that happened at the courthouse where I wasn't there that day. I was actually working the Trump trial down in Manhattan,
Mm-hmm.
but where he ends up getting arrested after altercation with the officers. And the crazy thing to me is, although I'm still cool with him, now we're not boys, we're not hanging out, we're not doing things like that, but we're cool. There are people on the job who don't understand that, oh, yeah, I could still be cool with the person, although an arrest has been made.
Mm-hmm.
Hell, man, there's been times I put handcuffs on an individual, and I'm still cool with them. But I realize it's a job.
Mm-hmm.
It's my profession.
Mm-hmm.
But it's how you do that job. Just because I can do something doesn't mean I need to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I maintain my who I am, but not caring about what other people think about me, because it's not my business.
Yeah. Wisdom.
Well, yeah, words to live by.
My other question is, we kind of touched on it already, but I want to elaborate a bit more. Like, what is your like reaction whenever you see instances of police brutality? I feel like you're older than we are, so I'm sure you've seen a lot more than what we have. Our references, Trayvon Martin, Mike Brown, all these things. I'm sure you have many more names that you've seen of people who are victims of police brutality. And as you mentioned earlier, there's people who are of law enforcement. The initial response is, we support the police officer, we support them. How do you handle that tug of war between being Black and seeing what happened to someone in your community, but also like having some semblance of loyalty to law enforcement that you work under?
My loyalty, number one, is not to law enforcement. Law enforcement gives me a separate knowledge base. So I look at things through two lenses. Through my personal experiences as a Black man in America, which I can never get rid of. And when I look at through that way, yes, I feel enraged sometimes. But when I look at it through the lens of my training, and I could kind of figure out, okay, wow, this happened, okay, he wasn't listening to what this person was saying. And the officer wasn't listening to what that person was saying. Like, I can see how and why things kind of blew up. The difficulty is being seen as, I think Shaft said it best. Sometimes you're seen as too Black to be blue and too blue to be Black. So to deal with that difficulty, I tend to break down what the training says. If I'm speaking to people in my community, but my personal beliefs usually line up with, but I don't agree with that.
Right.
Like, I think there are times where things can be handled differently.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie to you. Yet I also know that based on our training, it's not option shoot a person in the leg. If I hit you in your leg, I miss my target. If I shot the gun out your hand, I miss my target. We're trained to eliminate a threat. If a person feels threatened, this is why you have the language always say, oh yeah, I feared for my safety, for my life. That's why it usually goes that way.
Do you think that training is appropriate, or do you think this training should be reconsidered?
Yeah.
I think that training is military, very paramilitaristic, and I don't even know if that's a word.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
when you look back to the history
Yeah.
of the police force in New York, there were different eras.
Yeah.
You had the Dutch era, right? Green Lanterns and rattles. Then you had the British model, the British era. Um, they had the Watchmen, Nightmen. But police officers didn't always have firearms. They started out with the Billy Club. Eventually, you move on to the firearms. I think that was not till around the time of maybe a little after the Civil War. Don't quote me on that. I understand why we're trained that way. But even back then, the way you put the weapons in the hands of the police, media was used to stoke the fear of the community about crime and crime rates. And that we need, first it was the horses as well, when we couldn't give the weapons out. Then when the guns came and the swords and everything else, yeah, we had swords at one point. That played a role in it.
Yeah.
And it's the stoking of fear that allows it. Personally, I'm part of a special response team. That's our version of SWAT. I've been doing that 19 years come December.
Okay.
So again, I got trained in some of this paramilitary type of tactics.
Right.
It's not ideal. And this is my struggle, my personal struggle.
Yeah.
I see the need for it, but I don't like when it's being deployed unnecessarily. The question becomes, who makes that determination? That, I have no answer for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of times in these scenarios when police do end up using force on a civilian, a lot of the talk surrounding what was going on was like, oh, the civilian should have done this, the civilian should have done that, the civilian should have acted this way or acted that way, so as not to raise the officer's suspicion of danger or fear. And I personally think that's dangerous, right? Like, why does the civilian have to act perfectly, but the cop can, make a misjudgment or make a mistake and act on their misjudgment or mistake? So, how do you think about that? Like, and how do you think about, like, in your interactions, like, if somebody is acting a certain way, I guess, like, how do you handle that?
I went to an academy. That person didn't. I've been trained to do certain things. I've even gone and trained on my own, mental health first aid, things of that sort. And the reason I do that, constant training for myself, is because a civilian, for the most part, they don't go to school or academy to be a civilian. So why are we putting that on them? We're held to this higher standard, but it appears to me that there are times when a civilian acts as a civilian would react to certain things. And I know I have all these tools at my disposal. So just because I know I can take someone's liberty, their life, doesn't mean I should do it. I'll put it to you like this, Conrad. Police culture is one of regulated violence. Plain and simple to me. Every year when I go to the range, we study something called Article 35. You're familiar with what that is, right?
No.
Article 35 is justification for the use of deadly physical force.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
So basically, there are certain things that have to be met for me to pull that weapon out and to eliminate the threat. A nice way to say shoot to kill.
Yeah.
Because you don't shoot to maim. And the issue I have with that is, in the furtherance of my duties, I could technically kidnap you, kill you, take your liberty, right? Without fear of legal repercussions, as long as I did it based under Article 35. That's my justification.
Right.
So I'm a criminal doing criminal acts, but because I'm an officer, this is my justification why you shouldn't come after me.
Right.
That's a scary thought,
Yeah.
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 So the people in my profession who we are supposed to we revere. They're great. We doing all this. No, there's no difference between me and some of the people you represent who might have been in the same position, but because they defended themselves. And no, I'm not putting myself in a position like, oh my God, we should let the wall go.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I'm still an officer. But what I am saying is, it's not that big of a difference when you look at the acts that we commit and the acts they commit. Yeah. So for me, to answer your question, to answer your question, I go back to the fact that I'm a trained officer, but they didn't go to school to be a trained civilian.
Right.
And I can't expect them to act a certain way. If I have my weapon in their face, I can't expect them to be calm. When they're already riled up. I would rather say to a person, excuse me, sir, can I speak to you on the side? Instead of embarrassing you in front of your friends, in front of your significant other, your children. I don't know what the situation is. And we could have a conversation on the side, and you could tell me, you know what? Yeah, I got you. I'll do that. You give me the last act, but go back and say, yeah, I told him he could go screw himself. I'm fine with that. You did what I need you to do. The other part is I learned to drop my ego when it comes to certain things. And that's another thing that gets a lot of people in trouble on both sides. As an officer, I need to drop my ego when dealing with the public. You may have that ego, but I'm the trained professional.
I have so many questions that I want to follow up. I guess the one at the forefront of my mind is, you mentioned about your training. You said you're trained to eliminate the threat.
Correct.
You don't shoot to maim.
Correct.
I guess as a civilian, that's one of the hardest things for me to process. It's
Absolutely.
like, well, why can't you be trained to de-escalate? Why or shoot to maim? Like, what do you question that training? And like, do you? I guess I kind of already asked you that, but like, it seems so as an outsider,
right?
It could be so simple. Just change this part of the training to where every time you discharge your firearm, it's not to eliminate, but it could be to de-escalate. It could be to maim. To assess the threat, see what the level of the threat is, and see what's a necessary action here to eliminate the threat. Is there conflict in you about that?
No. No. Because I've made a decision early on, when I do draw it, it had risen to that level. Me personally. The other thing is, I know my capabilities. So if I draw my weapon, if I'm aiming at that hand or that leg, it's such a small target. That the majority, you think officers are terrible shots now. That part that moves, it's not going to get hit as frequently. It's not like you have a sniper scope with it. You being from Texas, you ever fire a firearm?
I have.
Right.
Few times.
Now,
he from Florida. I knew
you from Florida.
we both
that explains a lot. No. So when you're at the range, what do you aim for?
The biggest center of mass.
Right.
Center mass.
Right.
Why?
Because you're more likely to hit.
Biggest target.
Right. It's also a lot of organs and everything else there. It's to quickly eliminate that threat.
Right.
And you want to minimize anyone that might be around. So it's also a question of liability from the perspective of our agencies. If you shot that one, we're responsible. But you should be responsible anyhow. Right.
Got you.
Every bullet you're responsible for is supposed to count. As much as I would like to be able to just say, no, eliminate to maim, well, now that person bled out. They're still dead. Now they're paralyzed.
There's no guarantee that
There's no guarantee. If they're wearing body armor, now you train you go higher up the target. And in some kind of twisted logic, you preserve life by taking a life. Or, correction, you preserve life by eliminating a threat. We'll look at the mass shootings that take place in some of these schools. And then when you see the police officers waiting outside, which blew my mind when I saw that.
Yeah.
They're waiting outside. Wouldn't allow people to go in, but you're waiting outside. You're not responding to that firefight. And you have more deaths that happen because of that. If they did went in and they shot to maim, the threat is still there. You can still shoot when you're injured.
Yeah.
And it took me to actually look and see that person's not, the threat is still there. So that's why we use the term, you terminate the threat. You don't shoot to kill, you terminate the threat. It's a nice way of saying you shoot to kill.
Yeah.
We know that.
You're right.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. And I think like for me, I guess like I can get my head wrapped around the idea of shooting to kill, right? To stop the threat. I think what compounds it, what makes it worse to me is the determination of a threat part, right?
Correct.
I think a lot of the training needs to be had on like what actually constitutes a threat, right?
Right.
Because for a lot of officers, that decision making is shrouded in racism.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
Black man, hand in his pocket.
Right.
Threat
Right.
to me.
And so like what do you think about tweaking training for that purpose?
I'm for any and all training. Number one, any and all training.
Yeah.
When I was in the academy, this was back in 2000, we just dealt with the shooting Amadou Diallo. 41 shots, 40 times. And I actually had instructors who sounded like they were trying to justify that shooting. In my mind, you can't justify that.
Yeah.
Again, fresh, just in the academy.
Right.
And it didn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Actually, to this day, you can't.
Yeah.
Not too recently, maybe a few months back, you had a handcuffed black man in the back of a police vehicle. I'm not sure it was Florida or one of these states, southern states. He's shot at by a police officer because an acorn hits the patrol car.
Yeah, I remember
Yes.
this. I forgot what state it was too, but I remember this.
Right.
Yeah.
He starts shooting at this vehicle with a handcuffed black and say, "Oh, I thought he had a gun." And his supervisor who was on the scene started doing the same thing. So you're 100% right. There is something wrong. We know it's steeped in racism, but deeper than that, the training for it's more of this warrior mentality, not a servant mentality. So we have a warrior mentality, you have the paramilitary aspect of it, which in situations it may be needed, but when you're dealing with everyday people, citizens on regular, you don't need that. It's going to cause more harm than good, in my opinion. And I'm not a higher up on the scale or anything like that. What was your question, brother? I'm sorry.
I mean, you're answering it.
Right,
It was
right,
you know, like it was just more about like what parts of the training do we see need to be fixed. And
I also think there needs to be. I'm a big proponent of mental health first aid being done. So you learn CPR, AED, Narcon, you learn first aid, all that. But the mental health aspect of it, you're dealing with what we call EDPs, emotionally disturbed persons.
Right.
They don't hear things the way you may hear it in a regular conversation.
Right.
So my very uniform might be triggering them.
Yeah.
So maybe that's not always the best option for it. And once I identify a person, oh wow, this person is XYZ, I need to be able to call someone else, have the training to realize I need to call someone else, provide this person with services, like a crisis hotline, a crisis unit that could come out and respond to it. Now I could still be there,
Right.
but maybe a little bit away because I don't want this person acting on what I may triggered in them.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, again, that ego comes to play. We don't speak to people. We direct them. No, go here, do this.
yeah,
No, you're not talking to a person.
Right.
right.
I think I did that to you one time though, with one of your clients.
Yeah,
I said, "Counsel, speak to your client."
yeah.
But I did it more so because not because anyone was doing anything wrong, but because I wanted the attention. And I wanted to make sure put him on cue layout. Just
notice,
watch what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, I'm accountable to you guys.
Yeah.
I'm accountable to the communities I serve. You know, I might be out of a job after this.
Right.
I'm fine with that. But, y'all gonna hold me accountable. I walk in the communities
Yeah.
that I serve in. I go to the businesses. I'm at the community events.
Yeah.
I've been at your community days a few times.
Yeah.
If there's a backpack giveaway, I give money for that. Then I'm out there doing the toy giveaways, whatever. We're doing food, grocery deliveries. I'm there.
Yeah.
A few times people thought I was here to arrest. I'm like, no. I'm not here in that capacity.
Right.
You're on this list. You said you need groceries. Here you go. I'm delivering. Have a good day.
Yeah.
But again, to go from a warrior mentality to that I'm a civil servant. So I'm going to treat you civilly, right? I'm a servant. I'm going to do that. But when we reach a certain line, I'm going to do my job. And it's how you do the job, not what you actually do 9 times out of 10.
Yeah. I got two final questions. I don't know how many more you got, but I got two final questions.
No problem.
First is you kind of already you brushed over it, but I wanted to see if you can elaborate a little bit more when you were giving us your story about how you were deciding, what to do with your life.
Right.
Took the test. And then you said because of your experience with NYPD, you decided not to go NYPD and go the court officer route. I wanted to ask you directly, like, why did you decide not to go the NYPD route?
Street crime unit. Growing up in South Bronx, coming home from school, thrown up against the fence.
Yeah.
Yo, what the hell? What
Right.
do I do? Now, I think when you grow up in certain areas, you have a sixth sense about who's a cop and who's not.
Yeah.
So if I see 4 or 5 white guys with Yankee jerseys on,
Some
plain
cargo shorts
clothes,
on.
and they're jumping out of a black van or another vehicle,
Right.
immediately I'm like,
What time
okay,
it is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
these are officers.
Right.
But if I didn't have that sense to me, if I turn around and hit one of them,
Mm.
that's an assault charge on
It's
me.
a felony.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a felony.
Right.
Mhm.
So just early on realizing that,
Yeah.
it's like, I can't get down with that.
Yeah.
Then I considered, well, what if it's Nassau, Suffolk County or up in Westchester County? I become an officer up there.
Yeah.
I was a private tutor. I think I told you for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And working in Scarsdale.
What did you tutor?
All subjects back then.
Okay.
Yeah, real nerd. Loved it. But I had 5 students
Okay.
at one point, all Korean. That's how I learned Korean, believe it or not.
Wow.
But they had moved to Scarsdale. At that point, I was working in publishing, but still doing the tutoring in the evenings after work. And I would take the express bus from downtown
Mm-hmm.
to Scarsdale,
Mm-hmm.
teach them, catch the Beeline bus back down to the Bronx. I lived in the Bronx at the time, and then train on home. Well, one night I'm waiting for the bus in Scarsdale
Mm-hmm.
to Greenberg. Police cars pull on up.
Mm.
Lights come on, whoop, whoop. Get out their car. Excuse me, what are you doing here? Now, I'm a bit of a smart ass.
Mhm.
At the time. I'm wearing a suit and tie, corporate. So I said, I'm waiting for the bus. And I'm looking at the bus stop like, well, you got ID? Classic.
Right.
Already knew.
Yeah.
Right.
I know what time.
Well, I'm assessing the situation. Again, I want to be as, but I'm not going to do it. You know, it's nighttime.
Right.
So I say, yes, I have ID. I don't reach. Well, can you show it to us? Yeah, it's in this pocket here. Can I reach for it? Every little thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I reach out, I pull out my school ID. I went to Lehman College at the time.
Mm-hmm.
My work ID, Bantam Double Daydell. And I think I had driver's permit. Show it to him. Looking. Oh, what the hell are they doing? All right, have a good night. I said, well, why did you stop me?
Right.
Oh, there was a robbery at Computer City
Yeah.
down the street. And I have this bag with me. They ain't asked to check the bag. Not that I was going to let them search it.
All right.
Right.
But I'm saying to myself, this is the nonsense that permeates throughout, no matter where you go.
Mm-hmm.
Experiences like that
Mm-hmm.
made it clear to me that I did not want to go the PD route.
Mm-hmm.
It changes something in you. Everyone's a suspect. Everyone's this. Everyone's that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have good friends who are in PD.
Mm-hmm.
Good friends. And I'm sure you heard that there's no such thing as a good cop.
And that's funny because that's leading to my next
Second.
question.
Mhm.
My last question was going to be, as I don't agree with that statement. I believe there are good people
Mhm.
who do all kinds of roles, even if
Mhm.
I disagree with
Right.
with the job. But I also view myself as an abolitionist,
Right.
and I believe that prisons and jails should be abolished. I
Mhm.
believe the idea behind policing should be abolished and recreated.
Mhm.
And we've always had this conversation about is it a bad apple? Is it a bad tree?
Mhm.
So I guess my question to you is, do you think that the tree of policing
Mhm.
is bad and should be uprooted, or do you think it's more so it's bad police officers, a few bad cops, a few bad apples, but not the whole system?
I'm going to answer it like this. After the Yonkers situation, I came to the conclusion there is no such thing as a good cop.
Mm-hmm.
And I stand by that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to prove it. At least this is how I justify it to myself. I think there are good people who wear the shield.
Mm-hmm.
But to be a good cop, you have to do one or two things. You have to do everything the agency says, right? And what that looks like is losing the trust of that community you promised to serve. Now, if you do that, let's say you do everything the agency says, and you do this, you do that, you do this.
Yeah.
Well, the community sees you as a bad cop,
Mm.
right? But if you do what the community will appreciate you doing, you're not being corrupt or anything else. Your agency is going to say you're not a good cop.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no such thing as a good cop in that way.
I see what you're saying.
You may have good people who wear the shield and even that uniform,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not good cops.
Yeah, I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna take it a little bit deeper because we haven't gotten here yet. I agree with the tree being bad, like the whole apparatus and institution of like police work being bad, and the reason I feel that way is because of the history of police work and what that history is in America. And I know you were dropping knowledge to me the other day, and I want to make sure the people hear that knowledge too. You know, what is your idea of the history of policing in America?
I'm gonna go back to Tobias Boudinot. Back when you had a constable. I'm getting away from the Dutch area of policing, even some of the British one. Actually, you had two police departments in the city at one point.
Didn't know.
You had the municipal police
Mm-hmm.
and the metropolitan police,
Mm-hmm.
who were constantly at war with each other.
Wow.
Both were corrupt. One, I forgot the name of the mayor who started the municipal police, who got it, with the uniforms and everything else. I forgot his name. Damn, I can't believe I forgot his name. But he used it as a personal force, his own personal thing to break up people he didn't agree with. Actually, you had to pay him to become a police officer. You want to be a police officer? $25.
Wow.
Right? Tammany Hall. He was connected big time to Tammany Hall. So this is what he did, the corruption. The state gets hold of this, and the Republicans at the time, they were like the Democrats are today. The Republicans, they pretty much like, we want to wrest control away from this crazy ass mayor who's doing these things.
Right.
So then you have the Metropolitan Police, that was state. Well, these two guys are going at each other. I think it was 1857. You had the police riot of 1857 in this city.
Wow.
Now, the municipal police, they're more nativists. They want, you had to be born here, American born. White, of course, all these different things. The other one, Irish immigrants.
Yeah.
It's fine, everything else. So we have this riot, you have this fight. The Metropolitan Police end up winning out. I say that just to say that, the tree, the whole damn tree, is dirty.
Yeah.
And get back to your question, the kidnapping club that Tobias founded. Tobias Boudinot started a kidnapping club where they would just snatch up any black person, whether you were freed or enslaved. But there was money to be made. And he would give it to Richard Riker, who Rikers Island is named after.
Wow.
This racist of a judicial officer who would just send them. Yeah, show me your evidence. Okay, yeah, this is good enough. Send them back to slavery, whether they were free or not. David Riggers, abolitionist, black man. You kind of remind me of him. You start something called the Vigilant Committee, a Committee of Vigilance and Safety. Now, this man will walk on the docks. He will unarrest people that PD had arrested, carried a firearm because he feared for his,
Yeah.
That was the antithesis of that.
Right.
So we have a history of being resistant to those things. And in this city, they did not want a police department initially, uniforms, firearms. They didn't want that because it was too close. This before the Civil War, after the Revolutionary War, you had people who remember the Revolutionary War. They remembered having the soldiers in there. They remembered all these things, and they weren't feeling it. They start, I think, with 200 constables, and then eventually police officers.
Yeah.
and then 800, and it grows, it grows, it grows. The police department is there to do what? You look at their mission statement, we're not doing what the mission says. If anything, you don't prevent crime, you're reacting to a crime that's already been done. You get money from crime taking place, right? So we need that crime to happen. From kidnappings to the corruption, which was very big in the department even till today. You just had the police commissioner step down for corruption. Some things never change.
Yeah.
And you'll find it throughout. It was deeper than just slave patrols. A lot deeper than that. We get caught up on, it's overseas slave patrol. New York was a free state. They saw the money. It's tied to capitalism. It's tied to working off bodies, the lower class. The rich, they got on board when they realized, if you don't come after us, we're good.
Right.
So the working class, yes. Oh, no problem. It's those people.
Yeah.
So now you have the class warfare, right? Struggle. Now I'm going to be accused of being a communist.
Look, you're speaking my language.
Right.
So I was, you right on, man. Like you don't really hear like the racialized capitalism part. Like you only hear slavery is the history of policing, but it's
deeper than that.
Yeah, and honestly, I didn't know much. Like obviously knew about the slave patrol history, but I didn't know the details of like they were kidnapping free people as well.
Oh yeah, kidnapping clubs. Yeah. That's what was termed by, I think Rugler actually used that term. Look him up if you have the opportunity.
Yeah.
Abolitionists. He helped Frederick Douglass when he came out of slavery.
Wow.
Up this way. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1851, I think it was. That's when you find that a lot of these things really took off because there was some money to be made in it. And when you start looking at the police department itself, it took off from that.
Got you, man. Unfortunately, we are at our time. Well, you got.
We could do this for forever, man.
Definitely would love to have you back and just have a more historical conversation about this and about more things. So thank you for taking.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for that.
For sure. Roland, we always end every episode with asking our guests and the two of us just to like leave the last piece of wisdom, some last comments to the people. So if there's any last thing you could say, what would you want to leave the people with?
You're not your biggest mess up. If I could leave anyone with anything, you're not your biggest mess up, and just grow from whatever it is, move forward, and and you're also not your traumas.
Yeah. What you got, Conrad?
Man, this one, I think this piece of game I'm gonna give both to just like our civilian community and to police, right? It's treat people like human beings, right? Treat people with respect, right? I think for police officers in particular, right, you're dealing with a person with a lot of baggage, a lot of trauma. Roland said earlier, probably trauma at seeing your uniform, trauma at seeing your badge, right? I think it's incumbent on you as a person with a weapon that could take somebody's life to treat that person with respect first, right? De-escalate the situation, right? You don't have to go to 100, right? Even if the person says something smart to you, you don't have to go to 100, escalate the situation, de-escalate.
Yeah.
And then like to the civilian population, just in general, treat people with respect, right? Like let's handle disputes and harms in a different way than physical violence, right? Like let's try to do restorative approaches to everything. Let's just treat each other better as human beings. So, yeah.
Gotcha. And I think mine's gonna be a direct message to like the PD community, public defense community. I know for a fact. So our last episode was with prosecutors, and we have law enforcement today. And one day I want to have someone for the NYPD here, and I know there's going to be a lot of people with negative thoughts about just us sitting down and having these conversations. And what I want to do is challenge every public defender who believes that they're a true believer. We always say that we do this work because we see the humanity in our clients.
Mhm.
If you really do that, then you see the humanity in everybody. And if you see
Mhm.
the humanity in everybody, that includes prosecutors,
Mhm.
that includes police officers, that includes people you disagree with. And I feel like if we are able to see the humanity in the people who we disagree with, then we will be able to have these kind of conversations.
Mhm.
And these kind of conversations is the beginning to actual change and actually moving forward. So for anyone who got an issue with me and the guests we have on this podcast, I think the issue is with yourself. And I challenge you just to do some more self inner work. Roland, thanks you once again for being
Thank
here.
you. Thank you
Uh,
for inviting me to your space. man.
Of course. We have hit the end of another episode of the Brothers-in-Law podcast. We are rolling. We got a few others queued up. We got an excited episode of some people coming who were wrongfully convicted of murder, did like many years, and are now advocates against wrongful convictions coming up. So very excited. We have a docket lined up, and it's gonna be a good episode. But yeah, tune in, check into the next episode. Enjoy y'all day, y'all. Take care.
You too. Thanks, bro.